The Holy Gospel of our Savior Jesus Christ according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who sent me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do, for I have no place to store my crops?" Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich toward God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our strength and our redeemer. Amen.
Amen.
So if you were going to rank them, how many of you would have this in your top 10 favorite parables of all time? Yeah. This is one of those parables that it's memorable, it's vivid, but it's one that we kind of put off to the side. It's not in the same category that we might put those famous stories of Jesus about, like, the going after the lost sheep, or the kingdom of the heaven, and it's like a woman who finds a coin and celebrates with her friends, or the pearl of great price. They're all, and the think of the Good Samaritan, and on and on. We have these lists of the favorite stories that Jesus told. And this one, it might be familiar to some, but it's not necessarily one that we go back to again and again and again. So I'm curious, and this is going to call for some conversation today. What do you think about this parable? What strikes you? What's something that maybe you notice, maybe in this reading that you haven't noticed before, or because it's fresh at this moment? What do you notice about this parable? This story that Jesus tells us. What's that? Men are evil. Like, do you mean males? Humanity, right? Sure, we can talk about that. What else do you notice?
I noticed that in this parable that it really doesn't pay to accumulate a whole bunch of stuff just to sit back and say you have it, because what happens to it when you don't?
Right, so
We need to think about sharing it with people and helping others as we
so for everybody, like if somebody says something, I'm going to try to repeat it so everybody can hear. So Gloria said it doesn't pay to accumulate stuff just for yourself, because then it's gone. You know, if you're gone, that's it, right?
And you don't know when you're going to be gone.
And you don't know when you're going to be gone. What else?
Well, as Gloria said, our wealth should be shared with others.
It's meant to be shared.
Yes.
Okay, so our wealth is meant to be shared. Notice a funny thing when Jesus starts this parable, this story. He does it, as he often does, in reaction to a question or a dispute. Something comes up, and he tells a story as a way of explanation. What's the question or the request that comes up that prompts this story? question that that was asked of him.
Oh,
What was asked of him that got him started?
tell somebody else to do something.
That's right. Tell my brother to divide his inheritance with me. That's what started this. And what did Jesus respond first?
Who said I was going to do this?
It's like, why are you asking me?
I'm
And-
not bothered with this.
And it's interesting, the words that he used, the language that he used, especially when you think about what we think about Jesus. He says, I'm not your judge. We think of Jesus a lot of times as our judge, as somebody who's weighing us in the balance and finding us worthy or unworthy, grace-filled or sin-filled. But Jesus says here, especially, and we can keep it in this conversation, sure, but it's curious, though, that he would use that language. I'm not your judge. I'm not the one who's supposed to be telling you what to do. So that brings up a question. Why would he then tell us this story? How does this answer that question? And that's hard. That's hard to figure out what that juxtaposition is. Where Jesus says, I'm not your judge. Here's a story about how you shouldn't accumulate wealth for yourself. Does that strike a discord with you? Does that make you uncomfortable? Does that make you want to know what in the world Jesus is talking about? Or do you kind of just roll with it? Does it seem okay for you?
I just see it as what people say sometimes, well, he'll get what's coming to him later on down the road.
That's right. So he'll get what's coming to him down the road, so it's not yours to worry about, right? So you can put off worrying about it because it's on them. See this, the bad guy in the story, the villain, the wealthy person who does not share their goods, they are definitely set up, it's clear that they're set up as a villain. If you want to talk about the prototype of storytelling and the way that Jesus tells stories as well, this is meant to be somebody that we find doing the wrong thing. We're meant to think that about that person. But every parable is designed to get us deeper into that story. It's easy for us to think about that person as somebody else. The person who hoards their treasure. We've all had that experience, from us as children, to us as parents, to us in community. They aren't giving what they should be giving. I'm not getting what I should be getting. They're not sharing the game properly. Mom, Dad, they won't let me play. There are all types of dynamics in this when you think about it on a community level. But one of the things that I think that it's important to remember about this story is he's not talking about individuals. This is talking about relationships. He starts off talking to somebody who's like, my brother won't give me the inheritance. And he says, I'm not going to be judging between the two of you. You, as people of faith, should already have a way to work that out. And then he tells this story, which seems strange. It seems like it's about something else entirely, like it's about an individual. But let me ask you this. What happens if we take that individual, the wealthy person, and we put all of us in that role? What if that were the church that was the person of wealth? What if that were the church that were the person of wealth in Jesus' story? How would that affect how we relate to it? We would no longer have the ability to put it off on somebody else and say, well, we are of little means, and so everybody else who has means is the villain. But he's talking about his starting point is community and relationship. And so I think very much he wants us to identify as a group, as a whole collective, with this person of wealth. So let me ask you this. When we take the parable, that story, and that person of wealth, he's a farmer, he has crops that grow in abundance, and isn't it natural, isn't it normal to build barns to save the crops? Isn't that what we do? Yes. It's perfectly natural. So the accumulation itself might not be the thing that Jesus is pointing to. So let me ask you this. If the person is in isolation, who are they consulting about how to share their wealth? What does the story say?
Their own soul.
Their own soul.
Soul that's back and eat, drink, and be merry.
That's right. They're talking with themselves. The sin is about individualism. The sin is about isolation. The sin is about cutting off the community in order to accumulate for yourself. And whether you're looking at it on an individual level or a collective level, that has something to say about how we walk in our relationships, how we deal with the people who are around us, how we relate to the people that we encounter, how we view all of God's creation as participating in this community that God draws us into. That has something to say to the church. And it means that the church might have something to say about how it walks in the world. We don't live in isolation. We don't live making up our viewpoints as if we are the only one that matters, as if we are the only one that benefits from our choices. That is where Jesus has something to say again and again and again in the gospel, that we are dependent on one another and we are obligated to the other people around us. It's a sense of mutual obligation. That's what God's love looks like in the world. It is one of mutual care, mutual obligation, mutual responsibility. And when we are thinking about the good gifts that we have been given, the reason that it's problematic for us to quibble and quabble about whose is whose and what belongs to whom, it's because we're not taking into consideration that that is actually a collective gift. That our abundance that we have received is meant for the whole world. That's one of the things that we mean when we gather our gifts together to give to the community and support the mission of a church or of an organization. And I'm not just talking about Grace Memorial, I'm talking about all the good things that we do throughout this community, individually and together. But that's what it looks like, and I think that's what Jesus is calling us to remember. That we don't walk this road alone. That we don't live a life of faith in isolation from other people. That we don't look for our interests above anybody else's. But we see that God's value is what benefits all of us. What benefits all of God's creation. And that's the abundance that I think that Jesus is asking us to step into. And to ignore it, well, that's to our own peril. When we ignore that responsibility, absolutely that's on us. And absolutely at that moment, Jesus might be our judge.